Hey, everyone. Welcome as always, everybody. We'll give everyone a few minutes to join here, and then we'll kick off with some of our pre-submitted questions, as well as whatever questions that you guys might have today. Okay, let's go ahead. And Chris has got a question today. Here we go. The question I'd like to ask today: in the run query step that is generated for a database query, let me go ahead and drop this in the chat so people can see this. In a run query step that is generated for a database query, what is the default timeout? Does a specified timeout of 0 wait indefinitely? Okay, great question. It should be configurable on the connection level, on the step level, and as well. So this is a database defined query step. So let's create ourselves some place to work at, which would be what, 8, 24, 21. And I'm going to create a database integration. So we're going to go ahead and add a database integration, create data types integration, database integration, add query. We'll create a new connection called new connection for Lunch and Learn. And I will use my local. I think it's SQL Express. And the database name will be one of my databases, which is what? Let's see here. About is V7 numero uno. And username and password. And test. Oh, that's a pipe, not a backslash. Let me fix that. All right, so here's our defined query. So if we were to write a query here, we can see query timeout is at the step level here on the step itself. So I'll say this is new account query. I'll write a query, right? I'm connecting to my local database, so select start from account, and I can specify the default query timeout for all of the defined query steps for every instance of this defined query step in the database integration layer here. So I can go ahead and create this. Oh.
Uh-oh.
I didn't click. I can actually submit that without running the query now. I shouldn't be able to do that. Is there another technical person on the call here? Hey, Tyler, do you mind seeing, are you in 7 locally? Do you mind testing that for me really quick? Do you see what I just did by chance? Okay, disregard then. Okay, so here is my new database definition. I can edit this, right? I can edit query and change the default query timeout here. But I can override that at the step level. So if I add a flow and then I find that query step, so integration, database, new connection for lunch and learn. There's my run query step. I can, where do I do this at? Oh, not override connection string. I thought I could specify the query timeout on the step. I guess
There's a
under
checkbox
advanced
for it. Yeah.
Ah, see, there it is. Under advanced, at least in 7, specify timeout. And I could then specify this query to run in 45 seconds. So I can do it at the step level or the integration level, either or.
Okay. So I was seeing this, under this advanced checkbox for specify timeout and then timeout query, which tells me then that if it's not specified, it goes back to what was set up at the query definition.
Correct. Yes,
All right.
That's correct. Yep. That is correct, sir. Great question. That's absolutely something that we should have a doc team, if we do not already. I think the title of that doc, it would be under integration. It'd probably be under the integration. It'd be under database section of integration. So it'd be integrations database, and it would be managing database connection timeouts, and it would talk about doing it at the step level or at the integration level itself.
Well, I think there is an article out there describing how to create one of these, and then using the step.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I looked at it briefly, but I thought I was looking for a timeout discussion, and I missed it as part of defining the query.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely logging settings. Yeah. Either way, we should have something that's easier to find. So yeah, great question. Anything else on that, Chris?
Then that brings up, well, if I set a timeout as 0, does that imply wait forever, or do I have to kind of give it a pseudo forever in seconds timeout?
I don't think we have any special character that means forever. I don't know what 0 means there. I'm sure it doesn't mean nothing.
Well, I think I've seen that in other systems where a timeout period of 0 is intended to mean just wait until you get an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Or the connection breaks.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think that's what it means for us, but I'm uncertain. I'm uncertain if 0. I don't think 0. I don't think we're doing anything fancy there. So I would assume 0 means would probably fail, I guess. That's a good question. That's something I'll have to follow up on for you, Chris. I don't know off the top of my head. I doubt it's anything magic like that, though.
Okay.
Quote unquote magic. Okay. How do you copy a flow and paste it in another folder? Okay, so I have a flow here, and let's create a subfolder here. I'll just create another designer folder here called where I am going to move my flow to. And if I come into this folder, to copy a flow, I can right click it, and this applies to any entity type here, any like flows, forms, rules. I can edit and copy the flow. I'll name this flow 2. We'll create it. Now this will create the flow and take me right into it. So what I would do is back out and then go to flow 2, right click, go to manage, move to, select the folder I want to move to and move, at which point it would move itself. So there's not like a copy and move action. There's just a copy action and a separate move action. So the combination of those two things together gets you what you need to move things around the portal. And you can group select the move as well if you needed to move a bunch of things around the studio quickly. Any other questions about copying or moving entities? If you find something that you're trying to move and it doesn't have a move to action, it's almost certainly just an oversight and something that we'd love your help in getting into support so we can get that, ensure that that gets added in future versions. Okay, while we're waiting for anyone else to answer questions, just a quick note about an event we've got coming up, understanding the sort of current state of COVID and everything in the world, but we're doing another Decisions Days event in Norfolk in October. You can see some of the topics here. It's going to be an on-site event in a big space, lots of room for social distancing. More information to follow in terms of the actual agenda, the speaker set, and the days and times. But we want to just get some of this information out there. October 4th through 6th, we're going to have an on-site event in Norfolk, Virginia. Very large space for social distancing to talk about some things, review the roadmap, to review the company direction, and just give you some opportunities to connect with the broader decisions team. If you have any questions about that, please reach out to your customer success rep, and we will they'd be happy to get all that information together for you. Yeah, and Sabrina just posted a link to the registration page as well, which we've got we've got a great design team here, and I gotta say, I don't really fall for Flash that much, but I find this registration page to be exceedingly handsome from a design standpoint. So those guys do good work. I think I have a much more fun job than me. I get to do cool stuff like this. Then again, I get to do cool stuff like use our tool. So, okay. So that's kind of we're going to be talking about that a bunch more with more details here to follow really this week. But just wanted to start getting some of that information about Decisions Days out to the broader community. What other questions do we have today? We've got a little bit of a small group in here for our questions today. All right. Yeah. Okay. Scott's got a question. Is there a way to run a report and see ownership of all of the elements in decisions? Yes, absolutely. The data source you're looking for is element registration. So if I create a report here, I'll say all owners. Now, owners is a field which lets you be notified of is a field where you can configure notifications if someone changes something that you're the owner to, right? So the data source that you're looking for is element registration. Now, element registration is the name of everything, every component really, a flow, a form, a rule, a page. Those things are all element registrations, which admittedly is not the most intuitive name, but that is what they are. So I could create a report, data source of element registration. Here's entity name, created by, created on, and there should be a field on here called, I think it's owner. Let's just search. What's the name? It's owner. It's something owner email. And so you can see in owner email. Oh, interesting. This is on my local. Glazelle doesn't work here anymore. And in the Git revision changes, she's still the owner, which is we should probably change that. But then you can have a report here of the list of every element registration that's owned by every owner. You probably want to filter this down a bit too. You might want to not have everything, because some of these things won't be helpful to see. Maybe like decisions core, that might be a little harder to pull out. Let's see, maybe type. So sub element type, element registration behavior. There's like a behavior or something. Element registration type name. Yeah, you might want to filter this a bit so you don't get like a bunch of things like export single object. That's actually a designer element is a step. So you probably don't want information at the step level. You probably want flow, form, rule, page, report, things of that nature. So you might add some filters in here on element registration type name. So we could say element registration type name in list. Let's see here. In element registration type name is in list. And then we could put like report, flow, rule, page, form, some of the others I'm sure as well, and get a better view here of the ownership distribution across the things that users can create. And we probably wouldn't by project. Yes, you can do it by project, yes, but you'd have to do a bit of a query. If I can let's show you what that query might look like. I'll just write it here in the query editor. But to give you an idea about, so we would do select star from element underscore registration. That's the data source we were just looking at. That's all of the things in the element registration table. And then we could, as ER, and then we could join that on the module resource table. This is where your project information lives, say as MR. And that is er.component registration ID equals, I think it's mr.entity ID. I might be wrong, would have to look. Entity ID. ER as ER, on. Okay, and then if I looked here, I could see something like this, like er.entity name is mr. And we call it module name in this table, module name. Okay, and then I could add owner. So I could put er.owner, what was it, owner email, I think. Yep. And then a couple options here to get this into an actual report. What I would probably recommend is create an integration, a query. So I could come again like we just did. I could add a query, keep local connection. This is owner and project overview. Paste that in there, run it, generate it. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that other question was from Chris, not from you, Scott. Any questions about what I'm doing so far, Scott?
No, this is great.
And then I can create a report from that query. And what I can do is look under common, local connection, or the appropriate connection folder name here. I can find my owner and project overview, and then I could come in here and I could put entity name. Is owner email. And what did I say? Module name. Yeah, module name. And then I've got a report here that I could run in a normal report. So that'd be the way that I'd recommend. If you wanted it in an actual report, you'll need to join. And I don't think our data editor, the report designer, will let you join these things automatically. But now you could see you have a project-based, you have a project to owner to entity, or to designer element or element registration report you could run.
And where did you access the SQL editor?
Yeah, great question. It's a right-click action on designer folders in the studio. So right-click on a designer folder and go to Other Query Editor. And this lets you have a SQL-based view. You can just write SQL statements here. I mean, it is not a replacement for SQL Management Studio, but it just allows you to interact with the database a bit more gracefully.
Do you care if I ask a follow-up question?
Oh, no, please go ahead. There's not very many questions coming in today.
Okay. So I've noticed on a couple of reports that I have, when I'm trying to find the user, I'm getting the user ID back.
Okay.
And there's no join like to a username.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be another similar idea here, or how would you in a report? Since in decisions reporting you don't really have joins, you just have distinct data sets. How would you link like a user ID to a username if you wanted to find out, who created something on a report and they only give you the ID in the database?
Probably I'd write a quick SQL query and then put it in a report like the same way we just did. There's other less efficient patterns if it's small data set, where you could use like flow inline fields, like calculated columns that can populate cells on rows using the workflow, but those are extremely slow when you pass a lot of data in. So like, let's say there's a field like entity account session, right? Like if we've got a table here and it's like star from entity account session. And this is a table where it gives us, account ID. So I would end up just, call this EAS. I would do the same kind of thing. I'd inner join it to the entity account table. And then on EA.account ID equals EAS.account ID. And then that could give us like email address or first name and last name. So it's kind of unfortunate that you have to write a SQL query here to get this, but if you do have the account ID, you can just join to the entity account table and get a custom SQL-based data source in the same kind of way. This would be a fairly efficient way to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions too? Like you have like, hey, what table does XYZ live in? Right? Like those. Happy to take those on these calls as well. But support we're happy to give you all that schema stuff back end.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks for the question, Scott. Anything else? Who else has got questions for us today? Was that everything? Okay. I guess we'll go ahead and call it a day then. Just about 12:30, and looks like we got a small set of people on today, and doesn't appear any other questions in the hopper. Oh, actually, no, I failed to answer a pre-submitted question from yesterday, didn't I, Sabrina? We could answer that and send that to Sachin. Let me see here. No, different Sachin. Okay, yeah, the question is about we are using a curl command to call the REST API via a post method. The workflow gets triggered, but it does not wait until the workflow ends. It ends up saying complete like success before the workflow ends. This one's tough, and we probably, unfortunately, need some more information from the submitter. But it does make me think about a question, which is, what do you need to do if you call a long running? I'm not really answering this user's question, and he's not on the call, so I can't get clarity, but it makes me think of something that isn't necessarily intuitive, which is, what if I'm making a call into decisions and I expect, and that flow actually does a significant amount of processing, but I've got timeout. So we had a customer who does like claims processing, and Salesforce fires events into a decision server. And these things, because they talk to SAP and MuleSoft and some other services, they can take a second to return. In fact, they do a lot of processing, and they were running over. It was like that design, which I would say is, I'm sure, not optimized, was taking over a minute to run, and that 60 second was breaking the the timeout on that Salesforce had in terms of the outbound calls it was making. And so we worked together, and they said, I was like, well, is Decisions actually sending information back to Salesforce that Salesforce is consuming? And Salesforce wasn't. It was just getting an okay response that the call had been made. And so what we did is we worked together to understand asynchronous API calls. And so if I create a designer folder, I can quickly talk through what I mean here. So I think the question for this one, Sabrina, is like, how do I call a flow like asynchronously? How to call a flow as an API asynchronously, something like that. Async calling of flows. So let's assume, what did I just create? Oh my God, what did I just add? Oh, I added a design pattern, sorry. Click the wrong button. Let's try that again. Async flow calling example. Because it could be that you're making a call into Decisions that is actually quite heavy. And let's act like there's a main processing flow here. I'll just call it main process flow. And let's assume this thing needs to fetch a bunch of data for each that and to do something. I'll just put a placeholder step. Like we need to read through a ton of records and see if the current record matches some other record in some database, or make some API calls, or do something that we know because of the slowness of each individual call, and we have a bunch of calls to make, or just the volume of records needed to be processed through to do the actual data validation. This could take some time. Like, what will happen at first if we don't identify this is we might call this flow directly. Like we'll get its integration details page, we'll call this flow, and it'll run fast. And eventually, if it's doing enough work, like if this loop is big enough, or if there's a bunch of API calls, it might slow down. And the question is, are we actually sending real information back to the caller? So let's assume we pass something in. Are we actually passing data back? And if the answer to that is no, then let's let Decisions receive this call, return an okay response to the caller that says, hey, I'm accepted this request. It's good. I'm going to process it, and then go ahead and process that. And we can do this through a simple design where we bundle this flow as an async subflow and a parent flow and call the parent flow. So instead of calling our sort of main process flow directly, we're going to create what we think about as like a wrapper flow. I'll come over here and I'll just call this, say main process async wrapper or something like that, just to kind of create some sort of hopefully useful naming convention. And what I'm going to do is come into, at least in design 7, it's designer entities flows, and find start link flow async. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that flow I just created, main processing flow. And now we can see the difference here for the caller. So if I were to call this flow directly, let me make sure it doesn't fail here. So I'll just fetch account. I'll pass the account list into my for each step, and I'll do nothing. So that should run. Let's assume I'm exposing this as an API. So I want to call this as an API, and that's okay. Click APIs, click view. So I'm in the version 7 integration details page. And if I call this thing as a quick GET request here in a new tab, it should give me a done outcome. So, and then the outcome data that I specify here, let's just say I pass out item, and I'll pass an account out, right? If I then run that call again, it'll give me and probably a null, or maybe the last account object that the for each step had. So here's an example where I can't use asynchronous patterns because I need to return something to the caller. But if all I'm doing is just returning an okay response, like a 200 code, Then what I can do is call the parent flow with the main processing flow embedded as an async subflow. So again, let me set this up really quick and get its integration details. And then what you'll notice is if I call this, that, I don't think I copied that. Let's try that again. Oh no, that's right. Sorry, it's not. It's gonna fire off done, but what it will have done is it will hand it off this main processing flow with all of its overhead onto decisions, and then sent an OK response. It fires this off and moves on immediately. So if we have long running flows and those flows are tripping over our timeouts, and we don't need to send an actual like response data, just an OK request to the caller, then wrapping those processing flows and calling them a subflow, async subflows in a parent flow is a pattern that lets us interact over the API layer in a more async way. Just run this. When you're done with it, you're done with it. I don't actually care how long it takes. I just need to know that I've handed it off correctly. And this pattern could let you do that. And I think to this user's question that I need more details to answer, I think that's kind of what the question that they're asking. All right, and I think that probably takes us to the end of our session today, unless anyone else has got any questions based on that example I just walked through. Okay. All right, well, I'll go ahead and stop my share, and thanks everyone for the time today. We will, we've got, I think, who do we have? We have Morgan tomorrow.
Nope, it's going to be Andrew and Josh Lax from our professional services team.
Okay, Andrew, and yeah, and then Morgan and Brendan on Thursday. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. All right, thanks. Appreciate your time, everyone. Have a great afternoon.